In order for Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries to introduce the new Speaker of the House on Friday afternoon.
The 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson.
A lot of wheeling and dealing took place to get Johnson elected on a first ballot. It was so close, requiring 2 Republican members to change their votes, that it looked like it was going to go to a second ballot for a while there.
A lot of drama there. Joining us to talk about what the 119th Congress will be able to accomplish is ABC News political analyst Steve Roberts.
Steve, it's always good to get your thoughts. With that narrow majority, does Mike Johnson have his work cut out for him?
Well, of course. As you point out, just a handful of Republicans can really throw spanners into the works. And, of course, this happened in the last Congress, too, where a few hardline conservatives, including several from Arizona, not only made it difficult to elect Speaker McCarthy, but then drove him from office. And it's not just in the House. You've got to remember in the Senate, the Republicans have a margin of only 3 votes. And there are at least a handful of somewhat more pragmatic moderates, Murkowski of Alaska, Collins of Maine, Curtis of Utah, who can also effectively block Trump's program. So it's going to be very difficult for Trump, who is not a man given to legislative compromise, given to dealing with the other party, given to the ins and outs of consensus politics. But the numbers are going to force him to do it if he wants to get anything done.
Steve, what legislation does this Congress take up first? And considering what we saw on New Year's Day, do you think terrorism will be on that agenda?
Well, terrorism, of course, is an enormous blot on the new year, but it's not a problem that lends itself to an immediate legislative answer. There certainly will be a focus on the southern border. Donald Trump has argued, not always convincingly, that people coming across the southern border are terrorists and commit crimes. Sure, there are individual examples of that, and Trump was quick to accuse the perpetrator of the crimes in New Orleans of being an immigrant, when in fact he was born in America. And so Trump is very quick to associate immigration with terrorism, and there might be a focus on the southern border as a result of that. But the real pressing issues, you have the debt ceiling, and Trump wanted that solved before the new year, and Republicans refused to let him do that. And this is, of course, a bookkeeping issue, which, but it can be a source of a lot of mischief and a lot of deviltry, because Congress has got to increase the amount of money the government is allowed to borrow, and that's going to be first on the agenda. And of course, in the Senate, you have a number of very controversial nominations, including Tulsi Gabbard as the head of national security. And when you talk about the effect of the terrorist attack in New Orleans, the Republicans are saying, well, let's process these national security nominees quickly because of the threat of terrorism. And the Democrats are saying, wait, precisely because we've seen the potential for terrorist activity, we have to be more cautious and more careful and make sure that these nominees are capable of handling this job. So expect a lot of focus on Gabbard at national security and Pete Hegseth at defense, both of which are already controversial nominees. And I think the Democrats are going to give them a lot of scrutiny and subject them to a lot of harsh questioning.
One of the things that struck me as we're talking with Steve Roberts, ABC News political analyst, one of the things that struck me yesterday on Friday as I was watching is there's a genuine affection between Hakeem Jeffries and Mike Johnson. These are 2 men that really like each other. Is that going to play into this at all, or is it just going to be politics as usual? And afterwards, yeah, we can hang out and talk nicely to each other?
Well, you know, I covered the Congress for many years for the New York Times, and back in the 70s and 80s, it was very genuine affection and a cooperative spirit between the leaders of the Congress. My late father-in-law, Hale Boggs, was the Democratic whip throughout the 60s, and one of his closest friends was Gerald Ford, who was the Republican whip. And in fact, my late wife, Cokie Roberts, spoke at the funeral of Betty Ford to testify about the connections the two families had. But a lot of that has broken down in Washington for a whole variety of reasons, including the fact that the members of Congress don't bring their families to Washington very often anymore. And so these personal connections on the soccer fields and in church and school PTAs, a lot of that is lost. And so I do think that the members of Congress can develop genuine connections, but they're not neighbors anymore. They're not fellow churchgoers anymore. And a lot of those personal opportunities for connection and understanding have been eroded.
That's ABC News political analyst Steve Roberts with us on Arizona's Morning News.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.